Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Retail Tales, a podcast where we exclusively discuss all things AI across the retail value chain. I am Saurabh, and you know me. I'm your simple, humble host for this podcast. Today's episode sits right at the intersection of physical retail, operational intelligence, and AI at the edge. Well, if you think about it, retail is one of the most sensor rich environments in the world, right? Cameras everywhere, POS terminals, think shelf sensors, mobile devices, self checkouts, even distribution centers with conveyor belts and robotic arms. And yet, for decades, most of that visual data has been sitting there, unstructured, unanalyzed, and dare I say, underutilized. Video, for example, has historically been used for forensics. The kind of questions around what happened yesterday. So it's retrospective. But with the rise of computer vision and the rise of AI, the question and the discussion, the whole discourse has shifted from what happened to what is happening right now. And even further to what is likely going to happen next. And that shift is, it's not just technical, it is much more strategic, it is much more operational, and increasingly it is existential for retailers trying to operate in a very margin constrained, in an extensively labor constrained and a shrink heavy environment. So today I'm truly excited to welcome Joe White to the podcast. Joe is the CEO of Everseen, which is one of the leading vision AI companies in the world. And it's working with some of the largest retailers that, globally that you could think of. It's working with them to reduce loss, um, improve operational efficiency, and, turn that visual data, that visual information um, into real-time decision intelligence. As far as Joe is concerned, he brings over 3 decades of enterprise technology leadership experience, particularly across product and solutions and organizations that have served retail, logistics, and industrial markets. Um, if I and we'll hear from Joe as well. But prior to joining Everseen late last year, he served as the chief product and solutions officer at Zebra Technologies, and in that role, he guided the strategy and investment across a portfolio that included computer vision, RFID, barcode scanning, and mobile computing. So we're getting the best one of the best leaders to talk about the topic of the day today. And as far as I know, these are technologies that are the backbone of modern retail and supply chain operations. Joe has also held senior leadership roles at Symbol, at Motorola, and Dijax. And all through of this, he has built a reputation of being a customer-centric innovation leader. Reputation of being a cross-industry collaborator, and most importantly, a champion to have scaled foundational technology platforms globally. So, Joe, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Retail Tales.
Thank you, Saurabh. The way you framed that up, you made me feel so old. But yes, you're right. I've had decades in the enterprise IT technology sector, and I'm pleased to join you today to talk about vision AI and computer vision in general.
Thank you, Joe. And on this podcast, we don't call people old, we call them experienced and wise.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Amazing. So, Joe, let's talk about your journey into computer vision and leadership. Before we get into the conversation today, before we dive into the technology and the retail implications of computer vision, I'd love to I'd love to start with the human side of the story. As we've discussed, you've spent more than 30 years building and scaling enterprise technology platforms across mobility, scanning, RFID, edge intelligence, and long before AI transformation became the buzzword that it is today. And now you're leading a company at the forefront of vision AI in retail. What I find quite fascinating, honestly, is that your career arc mirrors almost mirrors the evolution of retail technology itself. From barcode scanning and transaction capture to intelligent automation to now computer vision interpreting the physical world in real time. So let me start there. Can you walk us through your journey? What drew you to enterprise technology in the first place? What pivotal moments shaped your leadership philosophy, and ultimately, what led you to take the helm at Everseen?
Sure. Yeah. So, as you highlighted, much of my career, specifically prior to Everseen, the prior 25 years was really focused around digitizing the physical world. And if you go all the way back to Symbol Technology and before that, Matrix, the RFID company, it was about providing a digital voice to the physical world so that you could drive insights and intelligence into operational environments like a retail environment.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, um, that journey all the way back to the barcode was really around the simple fact that, basic humans make mistakes. Um, and there's often a discrepancy between the way things should be operating and the way they do operate in the real world environment. So, really trying to converge um, data capture and data automation so that you could get accurate information. So, the barcode, interesting enough, a lot of people don't know the history, over 50 years old, was designed around the fact that humans were keying in pricing information into point of sale system. Well, one out of every 32, roughly speaking, keystrokes is an error. Well, if you're a large retailer and you're doing thousands of transactions an hour across a large estate of retail stores, that adds up very, very quickly. And so the barcode really automated that physical world into a automated data capture technology. And then along came RFID, where barcode is a one-to-one. You scan one barcode one at a time. Well, what if we could capture multiple items and collect multiple things at the same time? And that was my journey in RFID as RFID began taking off, of looking at how can we get more velocity into that data capture and the intelligence that it can give you in running in operations. Um, Specifically, when you think about how do I make sure I have the right product on hand when a customer comes into the store to buy it. Now, we all take that for granted sometimes when we go into a retail environment, but the complexity of making sure that in the case of apparel, I got the right size, color, style for you when you come into the store. Well, guess what? That's a very complex problem. And guess what? Solving that with the barcode and having to go around and manually scan every item is near impossible, right?
Mhm.
And so from RFID, certainly I led some of the development of the mobile computing portfolio inside of Symbol Technologies into Motorola and then into Zebra, was really about transforming what intelligence you can deliver to a human being while they're in the moment in the environment, whether it was RFID, whether it was barcode scan, whether it was over Wi-Fi technologies. How do I sense what's happening in my environment through the people that are, at the front line of operations today? Um, we then invested quite a bit around computer vision technology in some of the acquisitions that Zebra made around machine vision and entering how do I provide more intelligence than just a barcode scan. Machine vision being able to be leveraged for things like quality control, and be able to dimensionally look at the accuracy of especially in manufacturing environments, how product and goods come out, and how do you make sure you got the right product with the right quality when it's delivered. Um, and then obviously as I considered my next career move, a top three item for me was vision and vision AI in particular. They were in my top three technology directions. Um, and the reason why I found them compelling was just the notion of, what if you could take the human out of the equation and really give eyes to compute power? And when you look at vision historically in a retail environment, it's often been black and white CCTV cameras and those sorts of use cases. But if you could really give eyes to a retailer and intelligently interpret what it's seeing, the power of that, um, in really converging what I call the system of record, the way things should be done, versus the system of reality, the way they're really actually happening in real time. And
Yeah.
so that's what really attracted me to Eversea.
That's amazing. That's a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing that, Joe. Um, when most people hear about computer vision, um, they sometimes they think, well, it's something that appeared in the last 5 years. But the reality is that machine vision has been around in industrial settings for decades. Um, what changed recently, in my experience at least, is scale, compute, model sophistication, and more importantly, the boardroom conversation around computer vision. Retailers are no longer experimenting with vision AI in labs. They're deploying it across thousands of stores. And, Everseen is helping them do that. But from your vantage point, having seen edge technologies evolve over time, what would you describe as the key milestones or inflection points that transformed computer vision from a niche sort of a capability into a strategic retail imperative?
As you pointed out, I mean, certainly machine vision has been used in the manufacturing environments for some time, but it is very structured. It's very designed for a specific use case to measure a specific tolerance, and do that with high degree of accuracy. You could imagine in a manufacturing environment, if you're not 99.99% accurate, obviously the economics of your manufacturing line are terribly interrupted. Um, so what has changed, as you pointed out, the compute power, I'd say, the algorithms and the core technologies have evolved considerably, and I'd say cloud and data
Mm.
have been kind of the areas that have evolved considerably over the last decade. And obviously, the headlines today are about ChatGPT and generative AI or agentic AI. But if you think about that, it's only been around for 3 years. It's amazing how much momentum that technology has taken off. But it's also, I think, people's realization is it doesn't have to be 99.99% accurate. It has to be directionally accurate to allow me to get more business intelligence in what I'm doing. And that that notion has also changed uh, over the years with the technology. That, boy, if I could solve 90% of what I'm seeing and really derive intelligence, that's a long way to helping accelerate, you know, operational intelligence in an environment like a retail environment. And so much of that has changed over the last 5 years.
Yeah. No, I guess you're right from a cloud and data perspective and the unstructured nature in which retail environment, kind of thrives and operates. That's very unique.
Yeah,
But talking about retail, let's talk about the real retail problems.
sure.
Obviously, retail today is under tremendous amount of pressure, enormous pressure, more now than it has ever been. Shrink is rising. Labor shortages persist. Margins are extremely thin. Customer
Yeah.
expectations are rising, with agentic commerce. Um, and stores are becoming more complex environments than they ever were. One thing I've observed in my own client work is that technology only scales when it is anchored to a clearly defined business pain point. But I want to know from your perspective, what are the most critical retail challenges that computer vision is helping solve today? And maybe even more importantly, which of these challenges do retailers underestimate the most when it comes to vision AI and the impact that it could drive?
Yeah. So there's a lot in what you just said, Sarab. Certainly, as you pointed out, in a retail environment, omni-channel brought all kinds of new workflows into a retail environment. Buy online, pick up in store, buy online, deliver to curb, buy online, ship to store. Um, you know, all these new modalities of shopping. And by the way, they didn't add any more headcount to be able to solve all that. The existing workforce, if you remember, it wasn't long ago that a retail environment, you got hired as a cashier.
Mhm.
That's what you did is cashier work or inventory stock, and that's what you did. Today, when a retailer hires an associate, they could be in any one of those positions doing picking for buy online, pick up in store, or buy online, ship for store, to cashier it part of the day. They could be doing any one of these. And it's because, as you pointed out, the margins in retail are compressed and you can't just hire more people to do all this stuff. So you can imagine the complexity of that retail environment has dramatically shifted over the past decade. And that complexity also creates discrepancies between what should be happening in that environment and what actually is, whether that's inventory on the shelves, whether that's produce being replenished in the produce area and the fresh product area, or even the bakery department, whether you have the right, do I have enough product, do I have too much product, and how to respond to that changing retail environment. And so what I'm particularly excited about is certainly how vision could drive intelligence into that operation to really close the gap. If you often talk to retailers, they're aware that the gap exists. But the question is, how do I scalably, if you're a large retailer with 2,000 stores, how do I scalably actually get that system of reality of what's really happening in my environment and derive the intelligence and, most importantly, drive real-time action and change? We've grown up in a world with the internet now. Data is readily at our hands. And so throwing more data at a retailer is not helpful. Really being able to provide actionable and automated response to what's happening in that environment, that's what really helps a retailer. They're swimming in data today. Much of it just
100%.
gets thrown to the floor and ignored because the noise that all that data creates. But this is where I think what Everseen's doing with Vision AI and really driving actions and automating the response adds significant value to retailers.
That's amazing. You brought about the client's perspectives as well. When and whenever a new technology becomes a little bit more strategic, whenever it becomes, boardroom conversation, it also attracts, I wouldn't say a tad bit, but a lot of skepticism, right? In AI broadly, we've seen everything from overhype to fear to misunderstanding.
Yeah.
In computer vision specifically, I imagine you hear recurring questions from boards, from CFOs, from CIOs, and store operations leaders. So I'm curious, what are some of those, common questions or maybe even misconceptions you hear repeatedly from retail clients when they try and evaluate computer vision solutions?
Um, well, certainly, obviously, privacy and how do I protect my guests and make them feel comfortable with it, or how do I make my employees feel comfortable that that technology is in the environment and it's there to assist them. It's not there to be a big brother or oversee what they're doing, but it's there to assist them and help facilitate them in their job. Um, that tends to be a big topic. I think in the world of AI, computer vision and AI coming together, um, largely the question is, where's the ROI? And retailers don't have time to invest in technology that might have a 5 to 7 year payback. They need technology that returns ROI in year one, right?
Yeah.
And with the hype around AI, what they're looking for is what are the use cases and what are the solutions that can deliver that year one return on investment into my environment and solve the key business issues of, what I mentioned earlier about how do I go from a plan of record or a store of record to a store of reality so that I can react and respond in real time. Um, that tends to be the number one boardroom conversation that I hear from executives.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say, Joe, that in some cases, and in fact in retail in particular, some of those KPIs to really measure the value of computer vision and the capabilities that it brings along, those KPIs don't even exist because they were never defined in the first place.
Well, in our case, I'll give you the Everseen example. We do loss recovery, and loss in a retail environment is pretty well understood, and there's the tangible loss of what leaves through without being paid for in a store environment, and then there's the intangible loss of all the money I spent to get that product at that point in time in a store so that I could sell it,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So a lot of money goes into that, and that, I think retail loss is pretty well defined in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year for retailers today. And I'd say many of our customers understand that. Um, what we're doing at Everseen is really focused around how do I recover unintentional loss that just naturally happens because humans make mistakes, right? And we can quantify that. And we do quantify that for our customers of a 5 to 6x ROI in year one. And it's a very simple math problem. And the beauty about the technology is if you don't believe the ROI, we got a video clip that will show you that we recovered it. So the technology is quite compelling and delivers very compelling value to customers.
Well, the proof is in the pudding, right? And I'm sure when this episode airs and the executives who listen to this are going to ask you for that video from a proof perspective.
Yeah.
But Joe, I'd love to zoom out for a moment, and maybe this is the crystal ball moment. Um, in the last 5 years, they've been more around, proving that vision works in retail in the unique sort of landscape that retail kind of brings about. Um, what are the next 5 years about? Are we moving toward autonomous stores, toward predictive shrink prevention? Are we moving toward multimodal AI combining vision with transactional and behavioral data? Where are we going?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. Right now, if you look at the computer vision and the vision AI systems, including the ones that Everseen produces, we take in a lot of video and train neural networks on how to respond and interpret what it's seeing. And that's the very structured process. We call it internally our Ever Factory. How do we train these models to recognize patterns of what it's seeing? Um, and that we go through hundreds and thousands of videos to do that, to train in an environment. Um, One of the evolutions that's happening right now that I'm particularly excited about is synthetic data. So, is the notion of, rather than me taking a bunch of videos, why don't I use AI to generate synthetic data that I can now train the model on? And what that will do is collapse the training time frame that we have in our space and really accelerate the number of patterns and capabilities that we can do because we can synthetically generate whatever we want to train the model on,
Correct.
right? Which is incredibly and powerful. Now, I will tell you that same synthetic data approach can also be used to anonymize the people that we see in real time, which really improves privacy and how we handle vision AI systems overall. The other evolution that I see happening is obviously generative AI and how that technology can create neural networks that learn on their own. Transformer based models start to learn on their own.
Yes.
And today's environment, you're often making a trade off on um, how much you want to accurate, how accurate do you want to be versus false positives that can generate noise in the system in creating alerts and notifications. Generative AI has a promise of really reducing the false positives and growing the accurate intelligence that we see. And we're starting to see early signs of that in the lab.
Fair enough. The synthetic data is, you're right. It just collapses it brings that speed to market that is needed from, right from training the model to executing the model on real time data. So I'm right there with you. We have one of our clients we're working on with them right now to exactly utilize that approach to, drive synthetic data creation, to be training the model. Because some of that data, I mean, the situations may exist on paper, but they have never happened. So where do you get the real data anyway from?
That's right. And really, when you generically, certainly we have a product like EverCheck, which is at point of sale, but when we look at the other use cases throughout the retail environment, there's really just this notion, if I see X, do Y. And if you can use synthetic data to accelerate that learning process, you can deliver intelligence throughout the entire operations of a retail environment.
Yeah. Joe, in your last answer, you did talk about the anonymized, the faces or people in synthetic data, but that
Yeah.
is one of the concerns around privacy, fairness, maybe even responsible AI. Um, Computer vision in particular in physical stores inevitably raises questions around, bias, around fairness, around privacy, and customers are increasingly becoming more and more sensitive about how their data is being used. Employees worry about surveillance, for example. um, how do you what do you think about responsible AI in the context of computer vision and retail?
Well, I think it's extremely important. And it's foundational to what Everseeing does and how we approach the situation. Because, as you highlight, this is really a trust issue, um, and it's a privacy issue. It's both trust and privacy, and I think it's particularly important, because retailers have that trust and privacy relationship with their customers. That customers trust them, and so we got to live up to that. And I think today we anonymize all of our videos. We ensure, and you can imagine, even like at point of sale, if we're going to trigger an alarm that an event or something has occurred, and tell a customer that you there can't be bias in being able to do that. You have to be anonymized in such a way that there's no bias. Otherwise, you can imagine that will come back to the retailers
For sure.
in particular. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're very careful about how long we hold data. how we anonymize that data, how we ensure that our algorithms are bias free, and how we interpret what we're seeing in the environment. And we take that very seriously with our customers.
Love it. Love it. Joe, we're coming close to basically wrapping this episode up, but I want to close with something much more forward looking. There are retail leaders listening to this episode right now. I have in my subscriber list, there are CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, store operations leaders, frontline and corporate retail executives who know that AI and computer vision matter. But many of them are still probably early in their journey. Some are experimenting, some are stuck in pilot mode, some are unsure where to begin. Based on your experience, both in enterprise technology broadly, but now, more importantly, leading vision AI company. What advice would you give retail leaders who are embarking on their AI and computer vision journey, or who have just started their AI and computer vision journey?
Um, well, the advice I give is twofold. One is the ROIs exist today. So what at NRF National Retail Federation show in January, and even at Euroshop, a lot of people were asking, "Where's the ROI?" Guess what? People like ever seen it that delivering ROIs for the last decade to our customers. So you don't have to look. There's low hanging fruit that you could go implement today. I would I would secondly, strongly encourage jump in, dive in fast because it's coming faster than you know. And I think it's going to be transformational to a retailer's environment in the next 5 years. The ability to actually real time interpret video is cutting edge right now. And what I mean by that is all the things that Everseeing's doing today is looking for patterns of what's happening in that environment. But what if you could actually real time interpret everything in that video clip? I could actually know in real time what's happening in my environments and automate with those eyes. I can now automate changes in my operation that drive performance, that drive profitability, that drive better customer experience, that drive better operational, flow of how my environments work, and that will happen within the next 5 years. I'm confident that these large language AI models will be such that you'll be able to look at a video of us two talking and know everything about one another, right? So um, that's coming.
Those actually, I mean, in pilot mode, those actually do exist. I was talking to a startup company which is working on solving that exact problem that you just highlighted.
Yeah.
But honestly speaking, I think from an ROI perspective, and going back to our conversation earlier, some leaders don't really recognize, or maybe they do recognize that it is important, but how to tie it back to the age-old sort of KPIs that they've gotten used to some of the newer kind of measurements that they need to tie back to computer vision and how it adds value to them.
And I would tell you, in my 30 years of working with retailers across the various companies, I often run into retailers that think they know what's happening in their environments. And, and this is where Vision AI can be extremely powerful because it does connect the reality of what's happening in that environment, and it can do it at scale. And this will happen over the next 5 years. I'm confident in that. I mean, we're certainly doing things like you talked about that you're working with another company with in our labs, but it requires significant compute power that maybe operationally is not affordable today, or cloud capability that makes it extremely costly to be able to operate those models. But, you know, even in my last job, I used to tell customers all the time, What I'm telling you today in the AI world will be obsolete in 2 months
Yeah.
because the technology is evolving so rapidly. Like I said, ChatGPT came on the scene 3 years ago. And if you look at the difference between 3.5 to where they are today at 4, it's orders of magnitude
100%.
more powerful. So, I encourage customers get get engaged now because it's coming fast.
Oh yeah, the opportunity cost is quite high for retailers to fall behind on this curve. Um, this was phenomenal conversation, Joe. Thank you for taking out the time.
Uh,
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with me and with all the listeners out there. Vision AI, my key takeaway is Vision AI is no longer a futuristic concept, whether you are starting out on it today or you are thinking about it. It is becoming the nervous system of sorts, of physical retail, especially. And as we've discussed today, the opportunity is not just about reducing shrink or automating checkout. It's about transforming that treasure of visual data into operational intelligence. I'm super glad that we were able to have this conversation today. Joe, thank you for joining me on this podcast.
yes, thank you for having me. I certainly enjoyed the conversation. The one last point I'd share with you or leave you with is AI, unlike other technologies in the past, the more you invest, the smarter it gets over time. And so many technologies I've been associated with depreciate over time. This technology does not. That's why getting in early is really important.
That's phenomenal. I think that's right on brand as well. That's what I keep pushing on every solo episode or every guest episode on this podcast as well. So, listeners, you heard
Thank
it.
you.
You heard it directly from Joe White, the CEO of Everseen. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow the Retail Tales on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to connect with us, you know, if you have a suggestion or for a discussion topic, or you would like to suggest a retail AI leader for a conversation, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, Insta, or X, or just visit us at retailtales.ai. But whatever you do, stay in the conversation with us to keep learning a thing or two about retail AI. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay curious.